The snap of his fingers cut across the hall of the long treaty like a dropped glass, and the visiting minister did not even turn his head to see whether the man he was summoning was a servant or a king. "You, the coat, by the window, bring it." Another snap, 2 fingers and a thumb, the gesture of a man who has spent his whole life having things fetched. "Quickly. It is cold in here and someone has left the loggia doors open like fools." I was standing 4 paces to the left of Corporal Wren Halloway, in the dress of the household, and I felt the whole room hold its breath, without knowing it was holding anything at all. Because the man the minister had snapped at, the man he had decided was a footman because footmen and sentries both stand still and wear something with brass on it, was the most disciplined soldier I have ever served beside. And Wren Halloway did not move. I should tell you who I am before I tell you what he did, because the man who does not move is hard to read, and somebody has to read him for you. I am Sergeant Cale Wren of the household of Aldermark, and on the morning of the treaty I had the watch of the long hall, which meant I stood the inner post by the cold hearth, while Halloway stood the warm one by the south windows. And between us the great and the powerful of 2 realms came to put their names to a peace 40 years overdue. We were ceremonial that day. We were also, as we are always, exactly what the room needed us to be and nothing it wanted us to be. And those are very different things, and the minister was about to learn the difference the hard way. He was called the foreign minister of the reach of RoyalGuard. I will not pretend at his name, because his name does not matter, and the man himself worked very hard that day to make sure no one would remember it kindly. He was tall and well-fed and beautifully dressed, in a gray coat with a collar of dark fur and a sash the color of old wine, and he carried himself the way some men do who have never in their lives opened a door for themselves. He had arrived an hour early, ahead of his own delegation, which I have since learned is a thing powerful men do to size up a room before their equals can see them do it. And he had drifted, bored, to the window where Halloway stood his post, and he had decided, in the lazy, total way of a man who does not look twice at the furniture, that the soldier by the glass was staff. So he snapped his fingers a 3rd time. "Are you deaf? The coat, there." He pointed at a folded traveling cloak someone of his own party had left over the back of a gilded chair near the loggia doors. "Bring it to me. I will not ask a 4th time." Halloway looked at the far wall, that was all. His eyes were on the carved frieze above the opposite door, where the old treaty makers of both realms were cut in stone, shaking hands they had probably wanted to use for something else, and he held his rifle at the order, and he did not so much as breathe in a way you could see. I have stood beside that man through a state funeral, and through a night when the river came over the embankment, and we held a flooded gate for 6 hours, and I can tell you that his stillness is not emptiness. It is the loudest thing in any room. It just speaks a language most people never bother to learn. The minister did not know the language. He took the stillness for insolence. "Extraordinary," he said, loud enough now that 2 clerks at the far table looked up. "I'm a guest of your king. I ask for my own coat, and the help stands there like a painted post." He stepped closer to Halloway, close enough that I shifted my weight, not a step, never a step, but the readiness of a step, and I saw 3 of the early arrived clerks of his own delegation go very still in the way people go still when they sense their master is about to do something they will have to explain later. "Do you know who I am?" It is the oldest question in the world, and it has never once been asked by a man worth knowing. Halloway said nothing. Of course he said nothing. "We do not speak on post. It is not pride, it is the post. The silence is part of the duty, the way the stillness is, the way the straight back is, and a man who breaks it because a stranger is rude has not been provoked. He has simply lost. But I will tell you what I have never told anyone, which is what was happening behind that unmoving face, because Halloway told me later, in the plain, flat way he tells things, over tea that had gone cold while he talked. He was counting the doors. That is what he does when a thing wants him to react, and he will not give it the reaction. He counts the exits, he counts the people, He places the king's path through the room in his mind. He marks where a fast man would have to come from to reach the principals. And he files the loud, rude man at the window under noise, harmless, watch the hands. The minister thought he was being ignored. He was being assessed, sorted, and dismissed as a threat by a professional, which is a far more total insult than ignoring, and the beauty of it is that the minister would never know. "I see," the minister said, and his voice had changed, gone cold and precise, the voice of a man who has decided that since he cannot be obeyed, he will be obeyed by force of embarrassment. "Then I shall report this to your steward. A guest, made to stand in the cold, and the servants too proud to lift a coat." "Charming. Is this your famous Aldermark courtesy?" He reached out, and this is the part where the room truly stopped, and he took hold of Holloway's sleeve, the red wool of the household tunic, the sleeve of a soldier under arms, and he tugged it, the way you tug a sleeve to get a slow waiter moving. "Come along. The coat." Now, there is a law in this realm, an old and serious one, about laying hands on a soldier in the lawful execution of his duty, and I saw it become relevant in the space of a single second. And I saw something else too, which was Holloway's right hand, the gloved one on the small of the rifle, go from rest to ready and back to rest in a movement so small that I think I am the only person in that hall who saw it happen. He had decided not to. In the time it takes a careless man to tug a sleeve, Holloway had considered the entire arc of a response a lesser soldier would have given, and he had set it down, and he had gone back to counting doors. But I had not set anything down. I am a sergeant, and the warm post was mine to manage, and a guest of the king had just put his hand on one of my men. I came off the cold hearth. I did not hurry, we never hurry, hurry is what frightened men do, but I crossed the marble at the unhurried household pace that I have watched empty a room of its arrogance more than once, and I stopped at a correct distance, and I said the only 6 words the situation allowed me. "Sir, please do not touch him." And then, because the minister's face had already begun to redden, I added the 7th and 8th, the ones that would matter most before the morning was out. "He is a soldier, not staff." The minister laughed. He actually laughed, a short barking sound, and turned to me, delighted to have found someone who would at least answer. He had no idea he had just been handed the rope. "A soldier," he repeated as though tasting something amusing. "He looks like a footman to me. He stands where the footmen stand, he wears the brass the footmen wear, and he fetches like a footman, which is to say, badly." He let go of Holloway's sleeve at last, only because he had found a better target in me, and he straightened his fur collar with both hands. "And you?" "A sergeant, I take it, by the stripes. Then perhaps you have the wit your servant lacks. Fetch me the coat, sergeant, and I will forget that I have been treated, in the king's own hall, like a beggar at a gate." I will not tell you it was easy to keep my voice level, because it was not. There is a particular kind of heat that comes up the back of a man's neck when someone insults a soldier he would step in front of a blade for, and it is not a clean heat. It is the kind you have to fold down small and put away, or it will run the morning instead of you running it. I folded it down. I had a great deal of practice. "I am the sergeant of this watch," I said. "I am not able to leave my post to carry a coat, and neither is the corporal for the same reason. If you are cold, sir, the loggia doors will be closed within the minute. The draft was reported before you arrived. And if you wish your coat, I will gladly have a member of the household staff bring it to you. They wear blue. We wear red. The difference is not decoration." It was, I thought, a fair offer, fairly made, and it would have ended the matter with any man whose pride was the ordinary size. But the minister's pride was not the ordinary size, and worse than that, he had now been corrected twice, once by a soldier's silence and once by a sergeant's mouth, in front of clerks who would carry the story home, and a certain kind of man would rather burn the room down than be seen to be wrong in it. "You will have a member of the staff bring it," he said slowly, "rather than touch it yourself, because you are too grand, because the red wool makes you a lord, does it, and the blue makes them dogs." He had begun to enjoy himself again, I could see it, the way a man enjoys a fire he is sure is in someone else's house. I have heard about the famous discipline of the Aldermark household, the unbreakable men, the statues. I will tell you what I see. I see two men in costumes who will not lift a finger for a guest, because lifting a finger is beneath their dignity, and call it honor to cover the laziness. In my country, a servant who would not fetch a coat would be a servant no longer by sundown. In this country, I said, we are not servants. And the coat is already on its way. It was too. I had not turned my head, but I had heard the soft tread of blue behind me. Footman Barris, a steady older man who had been with the household longer than I had, and who had read the whole scene from the service door the moment the first finger snapped. He came forward now with the traveling cloak folded over his forearm, and he bowed with a correctness that no soldier could have improved upon, and he held it out. Your cloak, sir, with the household's apologies for the cold. And here is where the morning turned, though the minister did not feel it turn, the way you do not feel the exact moment a tide stops coming in and begins to go out. Because the minister looked at the cloak in the footman's hands, the cloak he had demanded, the cloak that was now being correctly and courteously brought to him by the correct and courteous person, and he did not take it. No, he said, I do not want it now. The moment is spoiled. He waved Barris off with the same two fingers he had snapped at Halloway, and Barris, being a professional, bowed again and withdrew without a flicker, the cloak going back over his arm. What I want, the minister went on, turning to me, is for your soldier to bring it, the one who refused. I want him to walk to that chair and pick up that cloak and bring it to me and put it about my shoulders. And I want to watch the famous statue learn that a guest of his king is not a thing to be ignored. That is what I want. And until I have it, I shall stand here, and I shall be cold, and every person who enters this hall will see your discipline for what it is. So that was the trap he thought he had built. He had decided that the only way for the household to satisfy honor was to dishonor itself, to make a soldier under arms leave his post and play the footman before an audience, or else stand accused of arrogance in front of two delegations. He thought it a clever box. Men like him always think the box is clever because they have never once been on the inside of one. I looked at him, and I let a moment go by, not for effect, though it served as effect, but because a thing was happening at the edge of the hall that changed everything. And a good sergeant lets the room do his work for him whenever the room is willing. The doors of the reach of RoyalGuard's own delegation had opened. They came in quietly, a half-dozen of them, in the dark formal coats of their service, and at their head was a woman of perhaps 60 in a plain dark gown with a single chain of office. The Chancellor of the Reach, the minister's own superior, the one whose name was to go on the treaty beside our king's. I knew her by her bearing before I knew her by her chain. She had the stillness of someone who has spent a life in rooms where the loudest person is never the most powerful, and her eyes went around the long hall once, taking its measure, and stopped on the tableau by the window, her minister, red-faced and triumphant, my corporal, silent and unmoved, the footman withdrawing with a refused cloak, and me, standing my correct distance with my hands behind my back. She read it all in about the time it takes to read a single line, and her face did not change, and that was the most frightening thing I saw all day. The minister did not see her. His back was to the door, and he was still warming to his theme. Well, Sergeant, the cloak, I am waiting. Send your statue, or stand here in your shame. Minister, the Chancellor's voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It crossed the hall the way Halloway's stillness crossed it, by being so completely sure of itself that the air simply carried it. What in the name of the Reach are you doing? I watched the color go out of his face the way water goes out of a tipped glass. He turned, and he found his Chancellor standing not 10 paces off, and behind her the whole of his own delegation, who had heard the last of it and whose faces, I will remember this, were not surprised. That was the thing. Not one of them was surprised. They had seen him do this before in other rooms to other people who could not answer back, and they had been waiting, with the weary patience of men who serve under a fool, for the day he did it where it could not be hidden. "Chancellor," he began, "these men, there has been an insolence." "There has," she said. "I have just watched the end of it." She came forward, and her people came with her, and the long hall, which had been a room with 2 soldiers and 1 loud man in it, became a room with a great many people in it, watching a man discover the floor had gone out from under him. She stopped beside Holloway, not in front of him, beside him, the way you stand beside a thing you respect rather than a thing you are inspecting, and she looked at his rifle and his medals and the perfect motionless line of him, and then she looked at the chair with the cloak no longer on it, and then she looked at her minister. "You snapped your fingers," she said. "It was not a question. At a soldier of the household, in the king's hall. An hour before the treaty I have spent 4 years of my life dragging 2 stubborn realms toward. You decided that the most important thing in the world was your coat. Tell me I have misunderstood." "I would dearly love to have misunderstood." He would not, the minister started, and the chancellor lifted one hand, not sharply, just enough, and he stopped. "He would not leave his post to be your footman," she said. "No, he would not. Do you know why?" She turned to me. "Sergeant, I think you do. Tell my minister why this soldier would not fetch his coat. Use small words. He is tired from his journey." I will be honest. I had spent my whole career learning not to enjoy moments, because a sergeant who enjoys his moments makes a poor sergeant. But I am also a man, and I am not made of stone, whatever the minister thought, and there was a small warm thing in my chest as I answered her, and I let it be there. "Ma'am, a soldier of the household does not leave his post. Not for a coat, not for a cup of water, not for a king's own request. The king would not make it, because the king knows what the post is for. We stand so that everyone else in the room may move freely and be safe doing it. The moment a man can snap his fingers and pull a sentry off his ground, the post is worth nothing, and so is the safety it buys. The corporal did not refuse you, sir, out of pride. He refused you out of duty. They look alike from the outside. They are not the same thing, and the difference is the whole of why we are here." The chancellor nodded slowly, as though I had confirmed something she had known and wanted said aloud in front of the right ears. "There," she said to the minister, "that is the answer. Now I will give you mine, and you will not enjoy it as much." She did not raise her voice for any of what came next, and that was what made it land. "You came into this hall early ahead of your delegation, ahead of me, so that you might be seen to be at ease in it. You found a soldier you mistook for a servant, and rather than ask, rather than look, rather than do any of the small things a courteous person does, you snapped. And when the soldier did his duty, you took it for insolence, because a man who has never been told no in his life cannot tell the difference between a no that is selfish and a no that is honorable. And then, this is the part I find hardest to forgive, you put your hand on him, on a soldier under arms, in a foreign court, an hour before a treaty. Do you have the smallest idea what you risked?" The minister had gone from red to a sort of gray. "It was a coat," he said weakly. "It was never a coat," the chancellor said. "It was you needing to be obeyed in a room full of people who could see you do it. That is all it ever is with you. I have known it for 3 years, and I have not been able to prove it where it mattered. I am, in a strange way, almost grateful to this soldier. He has shown me, in front of witnesses I trust, exactly what you are, and he has done it without raising his voice or his hand or even his eyes, which is more dignity than I have managed to keep about you in years." She turned from him, dismissing him as completely as Holloway had, and faced me again. "Sergeant, I owe your household an apology and your corporal a particular one. May I offer it to him directly, or does the post forbid it?" "The post forbids him to answer, ma'am," I said. "It does not forbid him to be honored. He will hear you. He hears everything." So the chancellor of the Reach of RoyalGuard turned to Corporal Wren Holloway, and she inclined her head, not a deep bow. She was a chancellor and he was a corporal, and the forms matter, but a real one, a true one, an inclination of genuine respect. And she said, "Corporal, On behalf of my realm and my own delegation, I am sorry. You were treated badly in your own house, and you answered it with more honor than the man who offered the insult will ever own. I will not forget it, and I will see that my realm does not either." Holloway did not move, but I had stood beside him for 9 years, and I will tell you that there is a stillness that is merely held, and there is a stillness that is offered, given back to someone as the only salute a man on post is permitted, and I knew the difference, and so, I think, did she. She straightened, and there was the faintest line at the corner of her mouth that was almost the ghost of approval, and she stepped back. And then she did the thing that finished the minister, the thing I did not see coming, because I had thought the humbling was already complete and I was wrong. It had not yet been made permanent, and a chancellor of 4 years' patience does not waste a chance to make a thing permanent. She turned to her delegation. "The treaty signing proceeds at the appointed hour," she said. "I will sign for the reach. The minister will not be present at the table." She let that sit for exactly as long as it needed to, and not one of his own people made a sound. "Minister, you will return to the residence. You will draft, in your own hand, a letter of apology to the steward of this household, to the sergeant here, and to the corporal, and you will bring it to me before the evening for my signature beneath yours. And when we return to the reach, you and I are going to have a long conversation about the difference between a servant and a soldier, and about how many other rooms you have made smaller by walking into them. Go." "You cannot," he began and stopped, because of course she could, and he knew it, and so did everyone. He had spent his authority the way a foolish man spends an inheritance, all at once on a coat, in front of the only person who could take it away. He went. He walked the length of the long hall under the eyes of 2 delegations and 2 silent soldiers, and the doors closed behind him, and the room let out the breath it had not known it was holding. And through all of it, from the first snap of his fingers to the last sound of his footsteps, Corporal Wren Holloway had not moved 1/4 of an inch, and had not said one word, and had won the morning so completely that the man who had tried to humiliate him would spend the journey home learning the size of his defeat by writing it out in his own hand. The treaty was signed at the appointed hour. I stood my post for the whole of it, and so did Holloway, and the Chancellor of the Reach put her name beside our king's beneath the carved frieze of the old peacemakers, and 40 years of bad blood between 2 realms became, with a stroke of ink, something that could at last be mended. I have thought since that it was a strange and fitting thing, that a peace so long in coming should have hinged, in a small and secret way, on a soldier who would not fetch a coat. Because what is a treaty in the end but 2 realms agreeing on where the lines are, and that the lines will be respected? And what had Holloway done all morning but hold a line and insist, without a word, that it be respected? The Chancellor saw it, I think. When she signed, she glanced once toward the window where he stood, and something passed over her face that I can only call recognition. But I am getting ahead of the part you will want, which is what Holloway said to me afterward, because the man who does not speak on post is not silent forever, and the things he says off it are worth more for the waiting. We were stood down at the change of the watch, and we walked the cold corridor back toward the guardroom together, our boots loud on the old stone, and I waited, because you do not pry at Wren Holloway, you let him arrive, and after a while he arrived. "You came off the hearth," he said. "I did." "You didn't have to, I had it." "I know you had it. I came off the hearth because he put his hand on you, and that is no longer your matter to manage, it is mine. You hold the line. I hold the men who hold the line. That is the post, same as yours." I glanced at him. "And because I wanted to." The corner of his mouth moved, which from Holloway is a great roaring laugh. "I counted the doors," he said, 4, and the loggia which makes 5, but the loggia draft was the only honest thing in the room all morning. He walked a few paces. He thought I didn't hear him. He thought a great many wrong things. "That's the part I don't mind," Holloway said. "Let him think I'm a footman. Let him think I'm a statue, a costume, a post with a man's face painted on it. It costs me nothing. The cost would have been in proving him wrong his way, in moving, in speaking, in giving him the fight he came in wanting. The day I do that, I've handed the worst man in the room the power to decide what I do with my hands. I won't. Not for a coat. Not for anything that small. He stopped and looked at me and said the thing I have carried since. Anybody can refuse a man with their fists, Cale. It takes nothing. The hard refusal is the one you give with your stillness, where he can't even tell he's been refused until it's too late to take it back. That's the only refusal that costs him everything and costs you nothing. I learned that a long way from here. I knew where the long way was, though we did not speak of it, because Holloway does not wear that part of himself where it can be flicked. There are men in the household who came to the Red Wool from the parade ground and the drill hall, and there are men who came to it from harder country, who stood posts in places with no carved friezes and no warm hearths, where holding a line was not a courtesy, but the only thing between a great many people and a very bad morning. Holloway is the second kind. He has a drawer somewhere with things in it he does not take out, and a stillness he did not learn from a drill sergeant, and the reason he could stand under a stranger's snapping fingers without the smallest tremor is that he had once stood under things that would have broken any man who needed to be obeyed in order to feel real. The minister snapped his fingers and demanded to be seen. Holloway had spent years learning that the men worth being are exactly the ones who do not need to be. They never met as equals. They were never in the same trade. The letter came that evening as the chancellor had ordered. It was brought by a junior of the RoyalGuard delegation, a young man who could not meet anyone's eye, and it was addressed to the steward, and beneath the steward's copy were two more, one for me and one for Holloway, all in the minister's own cramped, furious, beautiful hand, with the chancellor's name signed firm beneath his own as she had promised. I read mine. It said the correct things in the correct order: regret, respect, a recognition that he had mistaken a soldier for a servant and a duty for an insult. And it was, I am quite sure, the most sincere thing the man had written in 20 years, because nothing produces sincerity in a proud man quite like being made to write the truth out longhand under the eye of someone who can end his career. Holloway did not read his. He took the folded paper, looked at it, and handed it back to the junior. "Tell the minister," he said, and the young man flinched, expecting a blow of words that the corporal accepts, "and tell him the loggia doors have been seen to. He needn't be cold." The junior stared at him, and then something in his young face changed, the way a face changes when it has been braced for cruelty and met with mercy instead and does not know what to do with the difference. "He'll, sir, he was very—" The boy stopped. "Why are you being kind?" "Because I won," Holloway said simply. "A man who has won can afford to be kind. It's the losing men who can't." And he turned back to his post. I thought that was the end of it, and for a few days it was. The delegations went home. The treaty held. The long hall went back to being a quiet room where the great and the powerful sometimes came to do quiet and powerful things, and Holloway and I stood our watches, and the snapping of fingers became a story the household told in the guardroom, the way households do, until it had been polished smooth by retelling. But the story had one more turn in it, and it came from a direction none of us expected. It came back across the sea. 3 weeks after the treaty, a packet arrived at the steward's office under the seal of the Reach of RoyalGuard, and the steward, who is not a man given to summoning soldiers for pleasantries, sent for Holloway and for me, and we stood in his cold office while he read it to us in his dry, precise voice. It was from the chancellor. It was, in part, a formal note of thanks to the household, the kind of thing chanceries exchange and no one remembers. But it was also, the steward said, something else, and he read us the something else, and I have it close enough to repeat. She wrote that she had returned to the Reach and laid the matter of her minister before her own council, not as a private embarrassment but as a public question. What kind of men they wished to send into the world to speak for them, and whether a man who could not tell a soldier from a servant could be trusted to tell a friend from an enemy. The minister, she wrote, had been quietly retired from the foreign service. Not disgraced, she was too careful for spectacle, but moved sideways and downward into a post where there would be no early arrivals in foreign halls, no delegations to mistake for staff, no coats to demand. He would live out a comfortable, diminished life, and he would have a great deal of time to think about a morning in a hall across the sea when he had snapped his fingers at the wrong man. And then the chancellor wrote the line the steward read twice, once because it surprised him, and once because he wanted us to hear it surprised him. She wrote that she had given an order throughout the diplomatic service of the Reach that every officer being sent abroad for the first time would be told the story of the Aldermark Hall, the soldier who would not fetch the coat, not as a tale of foreign pride, but as the first lesson in how to walk into another man's house. Look before you summon, ask before you assume. And understand, she wrote, that the most disciplined men in any room are very often the ones who appear to be doing the least, and that to mistake their stillness for servitude is the surest way to reveal that you do not understand power at all. For real power has no need to snap its fingers, and the man who must has already lost. The steward folded the letter. He looked at Holloway for a long moment over the top of it. "You should know," he said, "that you have apparently reformed the training of a foreign service by standing very still and saying nothing. I am told this is a record, even for the household." It was as close to a joke as I have ever heard the steward make. "Dismissed, the both of you. Go and stand somewhere." We went and stood somewhere. We always do. I have turned that morning over many times in the years since, and I have come to think that the minister never understood the one thing that would have saved him, which is this. He believed, the way his whole kind believes, that the world is divided into men who command and men who fetch, and that the only question worth asking in any room is which one you are. He looked at Holloway and saw a fetcher, and he was wrong, but he was not wrong in the way he thought. He was wrong because the division itself is a lie. The man by the window was neither a commander nor a servant. He was something the minister did not have a word for, because his world did not contain it. A man who serves something larger than any person in the room, and who therefore cannot be commanded by any person in the room, and who fetches nothing and orders nothing and simply holds, so that everything worth protecting stays whole. You cannot snap your fingers at such a man. There is no finger snap in any language he answers to. He answers to the post, and the post answers to honor, and honor answered that morning by giving a proud man exactly enough rope and the dignity of being allowed to hang himself with his own hand. People ask me when they hear the story whether Holloway was angry. They want him to have been angry. They want a moment where the statue's jaw tightened, where the eyes flicked, where the human underneath the discipline showed itself wanting to swing. I tell them the truth, which disappoints them, which is that he was not angry, not for 1 second, because anger is what you feel when something threatens you, and nothing the minister did threaten Holloway in the smallest degree. You cannot insult a man by mistaking him for something lower than he is, any more than you can insult the sea by calling it a puddle. The insult requires the man to agree that the lower thing is shameful, and Holloway did not agree, because there is no shame in being a footman, in being staff, in wearing the blue and bringing the coat with a correct and courteous bow as old Barris did. The shame was never in fetching. The shame was in a man who could not tell the difference between asking and snapping, between a servant and a soldier, between a no that is selfish and a no that is the truest service a man can give. And that shame was the minister's, the whole of it, carried home across the sea in his own cramped hand. I stood beside Wren Holloway for 9 years after that morning, and I never once saw him move when he should not, and I never once saw him fail to move when he should. He is gone from the post now, retired to a small house with a cold garden he is forever telling me he means to do something about, and when I visit we drink tea that goes cold while he talks, and sometimes, not often, the morning of the treaty comes up between us. He never speaks of it as a victory. He speaks of it, when he speaks of it at all, as a small example of a large thing. And the large thing is the only lesson he ever really taught me, in 9 years of standing beside him in the cold. It is this. The strongest man in any room is almost never the one making the most noise, and he is never, ever the one who needs to be obeyed. He is the one standing very still in the corner, the one you might mistake for furniture, the one who could end the argument in a heartbeat and chooses instead to hold his ground and let the loud man finish revealing himself. Watch for that man. Do not snap your fingers at him. Do not flick his ribbons or tug his sleeve or call him a statue. Look at him the way the Chancellor looked at Holloway and understand what you are seeing. And then, if you have any sense at all, stand a little straighter yourself. Because you are in the presence of the only kind of power that was ever worth a thing, and it does not fetch coats, and it never, ever needed to.